One family in Italy controls the cars people drive, the news they read, the teams they cheer for, and the machines that grow their food. Not through elections, not through force, but through an invisible economic blueprint built over 5 generations. Today, we uncover how a single dynasty quietly became more powerful than most governments. Picture this. It's 1980, and the most powerful man in Italy isn't the Prime Minister. He isn't the Pope. He's sitting in the boardroom of a car company, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, making decisions that will ripple through every corner of the Italian economy. His name is Gianni Agnelli, and with a single phone call, he can shape government policy, reshape entire industries, and determine the fate of millions of workers. At the height of his power, this one man controlled 4.5% of Italy's entire gross domestic product. But here's what makes this story truly remarkable. The Agnelli family didn't seize power through revolution or conquest. They built it quietly, systematically, over more than a century, creating an empire so vast and so integrated into the fabric of Italian society that most people don't even realize it exists. This is empire economics, where history and money collide. And today, we're diving into one of the most sophisticated examples of economic influence ever constructed. A dynasty that transformed from a small automotive startup into a web of control that touches virtually every aspect of Italian life. From the cars Italians drive to the newspapers they read, from the football team they cheer for to the agricultural equipment that feeds the nation, one family has quietly positioned itself at the center of it all. The story begins in 1899, in the industrial city of Turin, with a young entrepreneur named Giovanni Agnelli, who had a vision that would reshape a nation. He co-founded a small automobile company called Fabbrica Italiana Automobili Torino. The acronym was simple: FIAT. At the time, Italy was still a young country, unified just 38 years earlier, struggling to find its industrial identity in a world dominated by British factories and German engineering. Most Italians travelled by horse and cart. The idea of mass-produced automobiles seemed almost fantastical. But Giovanni Agnelli understood something that his competitors missed. He wasn't just building cars. He was building the infrastructure of modern Italy itself. Within 11 years, FIAT had become the country's largest automaker. The company that started with 50 employees had grown to employ over 10,000 by 1915. This wasn't just business growth. This was the foundation of industrial transformation. What happened next would change everything. When World War I erupted across Europe, Giovanni Agnelli made a decision that would define his family's relationship with power for the next century. Instead of viewing war as a disruption to business, he saw it as the ultimate opportunity. Fiat pivoted from producing civilian automobiles to manufacturing military equipment, trucks, transport vehicles, aircraft engines, ambulances, essential items needed by the Italian war effort. The profits were significant, but profit alone doesn't create lasting power. What Agnelli did next was far more sophisticated. In 1914, he arranged a meeting with a young, ambitious politician named Benito Mussolini. The decision Giovanni made in that room would echo through decades of Italian history. He chose to financially support Mussolini's early political movement. This wasn't charity or ideology. This was strategic investment in political influence. When critics accused companies like Fiat of benefiting heavily during the war, Mussolini used his growing political power to shield his financial backers. The return on investment was immediate and substantial. By 1923, Giovanni Agnelli had been appointed as a lifetime senator. By 1932, he had aligned himself with the ruling government of the era. Fiat had become the go-to supplier for government contracts and military equipment. But here's where the story takes a crucial turn that reveals the true genius of the Agnelli approach to power. Most families that build wealth through political connections see that wealth evaporate when political winds change. The Agnellis were different. They understood that sustainable influence required something deeper than government favour. They were building economic infrastructure that would outlast any single political regime. The proof came in 1945, when Mussolini's government collapsed. Giovanni Agnelli lost his political protections and much of his wealth. He died that same year, seemingly bringing the family's influence to an end. But what emerged from that apparent defeat was something far more powerful and sophisticated than what came before. The torch passed to Giovanni's grandson, Gianni Agnelli, who would become known throughout Italy simply as l'avvocato, the lawyer. This wasn't just a nickname, it was a recognition of his approach to power. Where his grandfather had relied on political connections and wartime contracts, Gianni understood that true influence came through economic necessity. If you could make yourself indispensable to the functioning of society itself, political changes became irrelevant. Gianni Agnelli didn't just rebuild FIAT. He transformed it into something unprecedented in Italian history. By the 1980s, the company employed over 3% of Italy's entire industrial workforce. It accounted for 16.5% of the country's industrial research investment. This wasn't just a large company. This was economic infrastructure disguised as private enterprise. But the real masterpiece was yet to come. The Agnelli family had learned the ultimate lesson about sustainable power. Concentration creates vulnerability. Diversification creates invincibility. So they began to expand, not just in size, but in scope, reaching into sectors that seemed completely unrelated, but were actually carefully chosen pieces of a larger puzzle. They acquired newspapers, understanding that controlling information flow was as important as controlling manufacturing. They invested in agriculture and construction equipment, recognizing that feeding and building a nation created dependencies that transcended politics. They even bought a football team, Juventus, knowing that sports loyalty ran deeper than political allegiance. Each acquisition seemed like a separate business decision, but viewed together, they revealed something extraordinary. The Agnellis weren't just building a company or even a conglomerate. They were constructing a network of economic relationships so complex and so essential to Italian life that the country itself had become dependent on their success. This strategy would prove its worth in the decades that followed, as Italy weathered political upheaval, economic crisis, and social transformation. Governments rose and fell. Prime ministers came and went. But through it all, the Agnelli influence remained constant, adapting and evolving, but never disappearing. What makes their story even more remarkable is how they managed to maintain this influence while operating largely behind the scenes. Unlike the industrial dynasties of America or Germany, the Agnellis perfected the art of quiet influence. They achieved this through what might be the most elegant financial engineering in European history. While other wealthy families flaunted their power, the Agnellis created a web of holding companies so sophisticated that even financial experts struggle to map their true influence. At the center sits Giovanni Agnelli BV, a Dutch holding company that sounds bureaucratic and simple. But this unremarkable entity controls 85% of the voting rights in EXOR, their main investment vehicle. Here's where it gets fascinating. EXOR appears to be just another investment company, holding stakes in various businesses. But look closer at those stakes. They own 30% of Ferrari, giving them control over the world's most prestigious automotive brand. They control CNH Industrial, which manufactures the agricultural equipment that helps feed Europe. They own Juventus Football Club, commanding the loyalty of millions of passionate fans. They hold major stakes in the Economist magazine, influencing global financial discourse. Each investment seems unrelated, but together they create something extraordinary. Economic dependency disguised as market diversity. The genius lies not in owning everything, but in owning the right things. The things that matter when everything else falls apart. Consider their media strategy. Through their subsidiary GEDE Gruppo Editoriale, they control La Stampa and La Repubblica, two of Italy's most influential newspapers. They also own Radio DJ and 13 local publications. But they didn't stop there. They quietly acquired a significant stake in The Economist, giving them influence over financial conversations far beyond Italy's borders. This isn't just media ownership, it's narrative influence. When economic policies are debated, when political scandals emerge, when financial crises unfold, the Agnelli family sits at the table where the story gets told. But perhaps their most brilliant move was understanding that modern power flows through technology and healthcare, sectors that barely existed when their empire began. In 2023, EXOR acquired a 15% stake in Philips, the Dutch healthcare technology giant. This wasn't just diversification, it was positioning for the future. The current family patriarch, John L. Can, represents the fourth generation of Agnelli influence. Born in 1976, he's overseen the transformation of a primarily Italian operation into a global economic force. Under his leadership, EXOR has grown from managing primarily automotive assets to controlling a $13.5 billion portfolio spanning continents and industries. Elkan's approach reveals how modern economic influence operates. Where his great-great-grandfather relied on political connections and his great-grandfather built industrial dominance, Elkan leverages financial markets and global capital flows. The numbers behind their current influence are staggering. Through their various holdings, they touch virtually every aspect of Italian economic life. But the true measure of their influence isn't in what they own. It's in what would happen if they disappeared. Italian unemployment would spike as hundreds of thousands lost their jobs. Media landscapes would shift as major publications changed hands. Even global automotive markets would shudder as Stellantis, the world's fourth largest automaker, faced uncertainty. This is the ultimate achievement of economic influence, making yourself indispensable without appearing dominant. The Agnelli family has become what economists call systemically important, too integrated to fail, too valuable to abandon, too useful to oppose. The Agnelli story teaches us something profound about the nature of power itself. True influence isn't seized through force or granted through elections. It's built quietly, systematically, by making yourself essential to the functioning of society. Over 5 generations, one family transformed from Italian industrialists into architects of economic reality. Their empire endures because they became indispensable. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. If you enjoy learning how history and money intertwine, subscribe to Empire Economics for more untold stories.